Is the UK falling apart? It might sound dramatic, but look around. Record high inflation, a collapsing NHS, political chaos, and even the possibility of the country breaking apart. Things have never looked this uncertain. Is this the beginning of the end for the United Kingdom? Let's talk about the facts. Over 14 million people in the UK are now living in poverty. The cost of living has skyrocketed, home ownership feels impossible, and public services are on the verge of collapse. Meanwhile, Scotland is pushing for independence, tensions in Northern Ireland are rising, and the UK's global influence is fading fast. The country that once ruled a quarter of the world is now struggling to hold itself together. And here's the real question: can the UK survive this crisis? Or are we witnessing its slow downfall? Some experts believe the country is heading for economic decline, political collapse, and even territorial breakup. Others argue that with the right leadership, it can turn things around. But what's really happening? And what does it mean for the future of the UK? In this video, we'll break down 10 major threats that could change Britain forever. Stay with us until the end, because the final reason might be the most shocking of them all. Let's dive in. Number 1. Economic decline and cost of living crisis. The UK's economy isn't just struggling, it's spiralling, and millions are feeling the impact. Prices are climbing faster than wages. Businesses are shutting down, and people who once lived comfortably are now barely making ends meet. This isn't just another financial downturn. This is a crisis that's reshaping everyday life. Look at food prices. A grocery trip that used to cost £50 now sets you back £80 or more. Essentials like milk, bread, and vegetables are suddenly luxuries for many families. And it's not just food. Rents are skyrocketing. Mortgage rates have shot through the roof, and energy bills. Some households are paying double what they used to. People are being forced to make impossible choices, heat their homes, or put food on the table. Now let's talk about wages, or the lack of them keeping up. While the cost of living is exploding, salaries aren't moving. Millions of workers, from nurses to teachers to railway staff, have walked out in protest, demanding pay that actually reflects the reality of living in Britain today. And the job market? Uncertainty is everywhere. Companies are downsizing, layoffs are rising, and finding secure, well-paying work is getting harder by the day. This isn't just a rough patch. It's a fundamental shift in the UK's economy. If something doesn't change, the gap between the rich and the struggling will grow even wider. More businesses will collapse, unemployment will climb, and people will continue to lose faith in the system. So, the real question is there a way back from this, or is the UK headed for long-term economic decline? Number 2. Brexit fallout and trade issues. When the UK left the EU, it was supposed to be about taking back control, boosting the economy, and creating new opportunities. But fast forward a few years, and the reality looks very different. Businesses are drowning in red tape, trade has become a logistical nightmare, and the UK's global influence is shrinking. So, what went wrong? For starters, trade with Europe, our biggest market, has become way more complicated and expensive. Before Brexit, UK businesses could sell to EU countries freely without extra checks or paperwork. Now, endless customs forms, border delays, and rising costs are making it harder for companies to operate. Small businesses, in particular, are struggling to survive. Some have stopped trading with Europe altogether because it's simply not worth the hassle. And it's not just businesses feeling the pain. Consumers are too. Prices have gone up because it now costs more to import goods. Fresh food, electronics, and even basic household items have become more expensive and harder to get. And let's not forget the shortages. Empty supermarket shelves, supply chain issues, and rising delivery costs have all become part of post-Brexit Britain. Then there's the bigger picture, the UK's global standing. Once a major player in European decision-making, The country is now trying to rebuild trade deals from scratch. Some new agreements have been made, but they don't come close to replacing the benefits of being in the EU. Meanwhile, industries like fishing, farming, and manufacturing, once promised a brighter future, are feeling betrayed and abandoned. So the big question is, was Brexit worth it? Or has the UK made a mistake it can't afford to fix? Number 3. Political instability and leadership failures. The UK has always had political ups and downs, but in recent years, it's been absolute chaos. Multiple prime ministers in just a few years, endless scandals, party infighting, and a government that seems completely disconnected from the struggles of ordinary people. If leadership is supposed to bring stability, then Britain is in serious trouble. Think about it. How many prime ministers have we had since 2016? David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, who barely lasted 7 weeks, and now Rishi Sunak. That's 5 leaders in less than a decade, each one promising to fix the mess left by the last. But instead of solutions, we've seen broken promises. The government itself seems to be in constant crisis mode. Scandals, corruption, and reckless policies have eroded public trust in a way we've never seen before. From the Partygate scandal to questionable financial decisions that sent the markets crashing, the political system feels more like a circus than a functioning government. The problem is, while politicians fight among themselves, real issues are being ignored. The NHS is collapsing, public services are underfunded, the cost of living is crushing families, yet all we see is more political drama. People are losing faith in the system, and for good reason. When leadership is this unstable, how can the country move forward? So the big question is, does the UK have the leadership it needs to fix these crises, or is the political system too broken to recover? Number 4. Scotland's independence movement. For years, Scotland's push for independence has been growing, but now it feels closer than ever. More and more people in Scotland are questioning whether staying in the UK is really in their best interest. And after Brexit, leadership failures, and economic struggles, the argument for independence is stronger than ever. Could the UK be on the verge of breaking apart? Back in 2014, Scotland held a referendum on leaving the UK. At the time, 55% voted to stay, but things have changed dramatically since then. One of the biggest reasons? Brexit. Scotland overwhelmingly voted to remain in the EU, but despite that, it was forced to leave along with the rest of the UK. Many Scots feel that their voices were ignored, and ever since, the demand for a new referendum has only gotten louder. Then there's the issue of leadership. Many in Scotland feel that Westminster doesn't represent them and that UK policies, especially on the economy, immigration and healthcare, are making things worse, not better. The Scottish Government, led by the Scottish National Party, SNP, argues that an independent Scotland could rejoin the EU, take control of its economy, and make decisions that actually reflect the will of the Scottish people. But independence wouldn't be easy. There are huge questions about Scotland's economy, its currency, and how it would separate from the rest of the UK. And let's not forget, Westminster is determined to block another referendum. So the big question remains, will Scotland finally break away, or will the UK hold together despite the growing divide? One thing is certain, the fight for independence isn't going away anytime soon. Number 5. Northern Ireland tensions. Northern Ireland has always had a complex and fragile history, but in recent years, tensions have been escalating once again. Brexit, political disputes, and old divisions are resurfacing, raising serious questions about Northern Ireland's future and whether it will even remain part of the UK. One of the biggest flashpoints? The Northern Ireland Protocol. When Brexit happened, the UK had to find a way to avoid creating a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. The solution was the protocol, keeping Northern Ireland aligned with some EU trade rules to prevent a land border. But that created a new problem, a trade barrier between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Businesses have struggled, unionist parties are furious, and many feel that Northern Ireland has been treated differently from the rest of the UK. And then there's the Good Friday Agreement, the peace deal that ended decades of violence known as the Troubles. The agreement was based on a delicate balance, but Brexit has disrupted that balance. Political parties in Northern Ireland are deeply divided, and the government has struggled to function properly for years. Some fear that rising tensions could lead to unrest, or even a push for Irish reunification. Support for a united Ireland is slowly growing, with younger generations seeing it as a real possibility. If a referendum on reunification were to happen, the result could change the shape of the UK forever. So the big question is, can Northern Ireland's tensions be resolved? Or are we looking at the beginning of another major political crisis? Number 6. Declining public services. Public services in the UK are falling apart, and millions of people are feeling the impact. The NHS is at breaking point, public transport is unreliable and overpriced, and schools are desperately underfunded. For decades, these services were a source of pride, but now, they're struggling to function. How did it get this bad? Let's start with the NHS. Waiting times have never been worse. People are stuck in A and E for hours. Routine surgeries are delayed for months. And getting a GP appointment feels like winning the lottery. The staff are exhausted, underpaid, and leaving in record numbers. While the government keeps promising more funding, it never seems to be enough. And with an ageing population and increasing demand, the NHS crisis is only getting worse. Then there's public transport. Trains are constantly delayed or cancelled. Ticket prices keep going up. And in many areas, bus services have been completely cut. People are paying more money for a worse service. And for those in rural areas, getting around is becoming nearly impossible. Education isn't in great shape either. School budgets are stretched thin. Teachers are quitting due to stress. And many schools can't even afford basic resources. Class sizes are growing, making it harder for students to get the attention they need. Meanwhile, universities are raising tuition fees while cutting staff and courses. The result? A generation of young people struggling with debt and uncertain job prospects. Public services are the backbone of a functioning society, but in the UK, they're collapsing in real time. If things don't change, the gap between those who can afford private alternatives and those who rely on crumbling services will only get bigger. The question is, how much worse will it get before real action is taken? Number 7. Housing crisis and rising homelessness. Owning a home in the UK used to be an achievable dream. Now for many, it feels completely out of reach. House prices have soared to insane levels. Rent is eating up most of people's paychecks, and homelessness is rising at an alarming rate. The housing crisis isn't just a problem, it's a national emergency. For first-time buyers, the situation is brutal. The average house price has skyrocketed, while wages have barely moved. Even those who save for years still struggle to afford a deposit. And if they do manage to buy, soaring mortgage rates mean they're locked into huge monthly payments. Many are now wondering, is home ownership even realistic anymore? For renters, things aren't much better. Rent prices have exploded, and in some areas, people are paying nearly half their salary just to keep a roof over their heads. Landlords are increasing rents, evictions are rising, and competition for rental properties is fiercer than ever. People are forced to accept terrible conditions just to have a place to live. But the worst part? Homelessness is rising fast. More and more people are being pushed onto the streets, not just because of job losses, but because even those with jobs can't afford rent. Families are crammed into temporary housing, unsure of what their future holds. Food banks and shelters are overwhelmed, trying to help those who have been completely left behind. This isn't just an issue of high prices, it's a broken system. Without serious action, the housing crisis will only widen the gap between the wealthy and those who are struggling to survive. So the real question is, How did we let it get this bad? And is there any way to fix it? Number 8. Aging population and workforce shortages. The UK is getting older, and that's creating a huge problem. Not just for the economy, but for healthcare, pensions, and even the job market. More people are retiring than entering the workforce, and there simply aren't enough young workers to fill the gaps. If this trend continues, who's going to keep the country running? Right now, the UK has one of the fastest aging populations in Europe. Life expectancy has increased, which is great, but at the same time, birth rates have dropped. That means fewer young people to support an ever-growing number of retirees. And with pensions, healthcare, and social care costs rising, the pressure on public services is becoming unsustainable. The big question is who's going to pay for it all? Then there's the workforce crisis. Key industries like healthcare, construction, and agriculture are desperate for workers. The NHS is already struggling with staff shortages, and without enough doctors, nurses, and carers, the system is buckling under the pressure. Meanwhile, businesses are finding it harder to hire, which slows down the economy and pushes up costs for everyone. Brexit has made things even worse. With fewer migrant workers, industries that relied on European labour, like farming and hospitality, are facing serious staffing shortages. And with fewer young people entering the workforce, companies are being forced to cut back or shut down entirely. This isn't just a short-term issue, it's a ticking time bomb. Without more workers, the economy will stall, services will collapse, and the burden on the younger generation will become unbearable. So, the real question is, how does the UK fix this before it's too late? Number 9. Climate change and environmental challenges. The UK is already feeling the effects of climate change, and it's only getting worse. Floods, heat waves, rising sea levels, and extreme weather events are becoming more common, putting homes, businesses, and even lives at risk. But here's the real problem. The country isn't prepared to deal with it. Look at the weather patterns. The UK used to have mild summers and rainy winters. But now, record-breaking heat waves are making cities unbearable, and heavy rainfall is flooding entire towns. In coastal areas, erosion is swallowing up land, and homes that once seemed safe are now on the verge of collapsing into the sea. Insurance costs are rising, and some areas might become completely uninhabitable in the future. Then there's the energy crisis. The UK has made some progress in renewable energy, but it's not enough. Fossil fuels still dominate, and as global energy markets become more unstable, prices will continue to skyrocket. The push for net zero emissions sounds great in theory, but without real action, it's just an empty promise. And let's not forget pollution. The air in major cities is becoming dangerously toxic, leading to serious health problems, especially for children and the elderly. Rivers are being polluted by untreated sewage, and plastic waste is piling up faster than it can be managed. The truth is, climate change isn't some distant future problem. It's happening right now. If the UK doesn't step up and take real action, the damage could be irreversible. So the real question is, can the country adapt in time, or is it already too late? Number 10. Declining global influence. The UK was once a global powerhouse, shaping world politics, trade, and diplomacy. But today, its influence is fading fast. Once seen as a leader on the world stage, Britain is now struggling to keep up, losing its voice in international affairs and watching other nations take its place. The big question is, how did it come to this? Brexit was a turning point. Leaving the EU meant walking away from one of the most powerful economic and political alliances in the world. Suddenly, the UK was no longer at the table where major decisions were made, and instead of leading discussions, it was trying to rebuild relationships from the outside. Trade deals have been harder to negotiate, and global influence has shrunk as a result. Then there's the economic downturn. A weak economy means less power on the global stage. Countries with booming economies, like China, the US, and even some EU nations, are setting the agenda, while the UK is struggling with inflation, trade barriers, and a shrinking GDP. Once a dominant force in global finance, Britain now faces stiff competition from emerging markets. Diplomatically, the UK is finding itself less relevant. While it still holds a seat at the UN Security Council and has historic ties with many countries, its ability to influence global decisions is waning. Even old alliances, like the special relationship with the US, don't seem as strong as they once were. The reality is, the world is moving forward, and the UK is at risk of being left behind. So the real question is, can Britain reclaim its influence, or is its era as a global leader officially over? The UK is standing at a crossroads, and the choices made in the coming years could determine its fate. From a collapsing economy to political chaos, from a broken healthcare system to the growing threat of the UK itself breaking apart, the challenges are bigger than ever. But the question remains, is this the beginning of the end, or can Britain turn things around? Some believe that strong leadership, economic reform, and strategic global alliances could help rebuild the UK's strength. Others fear that the damage has already been done, and that decline is inevitable. One thing is certain, things cannot continue as they are. The cracks are widening, and unless real action is taken, the UK could face an irreversible collapse. But what do you think? Is there still hope, or is the UK heading toward disaster? Let us know in the comments. Your opinion matters. We put a huge amount of time and effort into making these videos. So if you found this one insightful, drop a comment, hit that like button, and most importantly, subscribe. It's just one click for you, but it means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Did you know that nearly 1 in 5 people who move to the UK end up regretting their decision? Shocking, right? Moving to a new country is supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime, full of excitement, new experiences, and endless opportunities. But in reality, the UK might not be the dream destination you think it is. Imagine paying sky-high rent for a tiny apartment, only to find out that your job prospects are limited outside of major cities. Or what about waiting months to get a simple doctor's appointment, despite the UK's supposedly free healthcare system? And it doesn't stop there. The weather. Don't even get me started. If you thought you could escape the gloomy rainy days, think again. It's not all charming cobblestone streets and quaint pubs. Sometimes it's just endless grey skies and constant drizzle. But here's the real kicker. The UK's political chaos could be a game changer for your future plans. Brexit has changed everything, and the political instability might affect your daily life more than you realise. So before you pack your bags and book that flight, ask yourself, are you ready for what the UK really has in store? In this video, we'll reveal 10 reasons why moving to the UK in 2025 might not be the best decision you've ever made. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Stick around to find out why. Number 1. Cost of living is skyrocketing. Let's start with the biggest shocker for anyone considering moving to the UK in 2025. The cost of living. And no, it's not just a slight bump. It's a steep climb. If you're thinking about relocating to the UK, especially to cities like London, Manchester, or Birmingham, brace yourself for a hefty financial challenge. The price of housing is the first major hurdle. Rent prices in the UK have soared in recent years. In cities like London, average rent prices can eat up more than 50% of your monthly income, leaving little room for anything else. The average monthly rent for a one-bedroom apartment in central London can set you back £2,000 or more, and that's for a small flat. Outside of London, prices are a little more reasonable, but still rising fast, especially in sought-after areas. And don't get me started on the housing market if you're considering buying property. The UK has been facing a housing supply crisis where demand vastly outpaces the number of homes available. But it's not just about rent. Groceries are becoming more expensive too. In fact, the UK has been seeing food price inflation in recent years, with staples like bread, milk, and meat costing much more than they used to. With rising energy prices and increased taxes, your weekly shopping trip could take a major hit on your budget. Finally, don't forget transportation costs. Public transportation, though extensive, is not cheap. A monthly travel pass for the London Underground can cost you upwards of £150. Plus, you've got to factor in the endless price hikes on petrol, tolls, and car insurance if you plan to drive. So, if you're dreaming of an affordable, easy life in the UK, think again. The rising cost of living could leave you with more financial stress than you bargained for. Number 2. Housing crisis. Rents are out of control. If you thought the cost of living was bad, wait until you get a load of the housing crisis in the UK. The demand for homes has skyrocketed, but the supply simply hasn't kept up. Whether you're looking to rent or buy, you'll quickly find that securing a place to live can feel like a battle, and it's getting more expensive by the day. Let's talk about renting first. In major cities like London, you can expect rent prices to have increased by more than 20% in just the past few years. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in central London now sits at around £2,000 per month. If you move out to the outskirts of London or smaller cities like Manchester, the rent drops slightly, but it's still incredibly high compared to other European countries. Finding affordable rental properties has become increasingly difficult as well. The housing market is flooded with people competing for the same apartments, and the supply of rental properties simply doesn't meet the demand. Many landlords are now asking for upfront payments, demanding 6 months' rent in advance, or even hiking rents by as much as 10% or 15% in a single year. For people moving to the UK with limited savings or a small budget, this could mean financial strain right from the get-go. Now, if you're thinking about buying property, good luck. House prices in the UK have continued to rise, even after the pandemic, making it harder than ever for first-time buyers to get on the property ladder. The average house price has crossed the £250,000 mark, and that's in areas outside the high-demand zones like London. Buying property in London itself? Expect to pay well over £500,000 for a modest home. In short, the UK's housing crisis isn't just an inconvenience. It's a reality that could significantly impact your life, financially and emotionally. So before packing your bags, make sure you've got a solid plan for housing, because it might cost you a lot more than you expect. Number 3. The weather will test your patience. If you've ever daydreamed about moving to the UK, there's a good chance you've imagined cozying up in a charming pub on a rainy afternoon, or strolling through a picturesque village surrounded by lush greenery. But let's be real. The weather in the UK is one of the biggest challenges you'll face as a newcomer. It's not just a bit dreary, it's often downright miserable. The UK is famous for its rainy, gloomy weather, and for good reason. In fact, cities like London, Manchester, and Glasgow can expect more than 150 rainy days a year. So when it comes to packing for your new life, don't forget to invest in a solid umbrella. Or better yet, a waterproof jacket and boots, because you'll be seeing a lot of water falling from the sky. But it's not just about the rain. The UK's winters can feel endless. The days are short, with daylight hours often dipping below 8 hours during the peak of winter, which can lead to that dreaded feeling of never-ending darkness. And don't expect to see the sun all that often either. The average annual sunshine in London is just 1,500 hours. Compare that to a sunnier spot like Madrid, which gets nearly double that. This constant overcast sky can have a major impact on your mood. The lack of sunlight has been linked to seasonal affective disorder, SARD, a form of depression that many expats struggle with when adjusting to the UK's weather. It's a real issue, especially if you're coming from a sunnier, warmer climate. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. The UK does have its share of beautiful, sunny days, especially in late spring and early summer. But for the most part, don't expect constant sunshine or predictable weather. If you're moving to the UK, just remember, you'll need to embrace the rain and make peace with the endless grey skies. Or better yet, plan to visit places where the sun is more frequent. Number 4. Public transportation is not as convenient as you think. The UK is often praised for its extensive public transportation network, and for good reason. There are trains, buses, trams, and the famous London Underground. But here's the catch. Convenience doesn't always meet expectation. Let's start with London, where the tube is often seen as a symbol of the city's fast-paced, efficient lifestyle. Sounds great, right? Well, yes and no. While the London Underground is incredibly convenient for getting around central areas, it can quickly become a nightmare during rush hours. Picture this: a packed train, no seat, no personal space, and the constant hum of people crammed in like sardines. The overcrowding is often a real issue, and with the growing population, it's getting worse. And it's not just about the sheer number of people on trains. Delays are a common occurrence, even during peak hours. The infrastructure, although extensive, is aging, and constant repairs can lead to unexpected service interruptions. 1 minute, you're cruising along. The next, you're stuck waiting for an announcement that your train is delayed. Again. Then, there's the cost. Public transportation in the UK is far from cheap. In London, the daily commute can cost you upwards of £10 for a simple round trip, and it only gets more expensive the farther you go. If you're planning to use public transport regularly, these costs can add up quickly. And it's not just about trains. Buses and trams are also frequently delayed, and in many cities outside London, routes can be unreliable or infrequent, leaving you stuck waiting for long periods. Lastly, if you're considering regional travel, the train system across the UK can be inconsistent. While major cities like London have excellent rail links, travelling between smaller towns or regions can be a hassle. Trains can be slow, expensive, and often subject to delays. So if you're moving to the UK and relying on public transportation, be prepared for the reality check. It's not as convenient or reliable as many might think, and you'll need a lot of patience to make it work. Number 5. The healthcare system. Long waiting times. Now, one of the UK's proudest features has always been the NHS, National Health Service, offering free healthcare at the point of use. It sounds like a dream, right? Especially if you're moving from a country with high medical costs. But there's a crucial downside that many overlook: the waiting times. In theory, the NHS is a lifesaver. You walk into a GP's office and you're covered for everything from minor illnesses to emergency treatments. But in reality, getting timely treatment can be a huge challenge. In recent years, waiting lists for non-emergency procedures and specialist appointments have grown exponentially. We're talking about waiting several months for a consultation or treatment, which can be frustrating if you need quick medical attention. Take GP appointments, for instance. In some parts of the UK, getting an appointment with a doctor can take weeks, and that's assuming you can get through to the practice on the phone in the first place. For more specialised care, the waiting times can be even longer. Hip replacements, cataract surgeries, and dermatology treatments all have lengthy waiting lists. In 2024, it was reported that over 7 million people were waiting for NHS treatment, a number that continues to climb. If you require urgent care, the NHS does provide quick access through accident and emergency A&E services, but even here, you might face long waits. During busy periods, such as winter, emergency rooms are often overcrowded, and waiting times can stretch for hours. In some cases, people report waiting for over 12 hours before receiving treatment. The strain on the NHS is the result of underfunding, staff shortages, and the increasing demand for healthcare as the population ages. While the system itself is incredibly beneficial and ensures no one has to pay for healthcare directly, the waiting times are a reality you'll have to face if you decide to move to the UK in 2025. So, while the NHS might seem like a massive draw, Be prepared to wait, sometimes longer than you'd like, before getting the care you need. Number 6. Taxation and national insurance. Higher than expected. The UK's taxation system is one of the highest in Europe, and understanding how it works is crucial before making any decisions about relocation. The reality is, the more you earn, the more you'll pay, whether it's through income tax, national insurance, or other hidden charges. Let's start with income tax. In the UK, the tax system operates on a progressive scale, meaning the more you earn, the higher the percentage you pay. For example, if you earn above £12,570 a year, the personal allowance, Hojito Tonsem, you'll start paying 20% tax on your income. Once you hit £50,270, that jumps to 40%. For those in high-paying jobs, it can go up to 45% for earnings over £150,000. Compared to other countries in Europe, this tax rate is on the higher end. But that's not all. On top of income tax, you'll also be paying national insurance, NI, which is essentially a tax to fund social benefits like the NHS and pensions. For employees, NI contributions start at 12% on earnings between £12,570 and £50,270, and rise to 2% on anything above that. For self-employed individuals, the rates differ, but they're still significant. It's worth noting that many expats are shocked by how much they pay in national insurance, as it doesn't always feel like a direct benefit unless you're accessing healthcare or social services. While the system is designed to support public services, the high deductions can leave you feeling like you're working just to pay off your taxes. Lastly, there's the hidden tax burden. From value-added tax, VAT, on goods and services to council tax, local government tax. The UK has multiple ways of extracting money from you. Even basic purchases are taxed at 20%, and local tax rates vary depending on where you live. So before packing up your life and heading to the UK, you'll need to factor in these higher than expected taxes, as they can have a significant impact on your overall take-home pay. The dream of living in the UK may come with a higher financial cost than you anticipated. Number 7. Limited job opportunities outside major cities. If you're planning to move to the UK in 2025 and are hoping to settle in a smaller town or the countryside, here's a reality check. Job opportunities are limited outside major cities. While London, Manchester, Birmingham, and other big cities offer a wealth of career prospects, rural areas and smaller towns often have fewer employment options, particularly in specialised fields. Let's talk about London first. It's a global hub for finance, tech, media, and culture. Whether you're in digital marketing, banking, or even fashion, the opportunities in London are hard to beat. But this advantage comes at a steep price. Competition is fierce. Thousands of job seekers flock to London, so standing out in the crowd can be tough. Plus, as we already discussed, the cost of living is sky high, which means your paycheck might get eaten up by rent and daily expenses, leaving you with little to show for all your hard work. If you're looking to live somewhere more affordable, like a charming small town or the countryside, you'll find that job availability drops significantly. Many smaller towns rely heavily on local industries like agriculture, retail, and tourism, but these sectors don't always offer high-paying or career-advancing positions. If you work in tech, healthcare, or professional services, you'll likely need to relocate to a larger city to find meaningful work. Remote work has opened up opportunities for those seeking flexibility, but even then, networking and career advancement can be more limited if you're not in close proximity to a major business hub. For those moving to the UK with dreams of an idyllic life in the countryside, it's essential to be realistic about employment prospects. Without a thriving job market nearby, it might be harder than you think to find meaningful work or grow in your career. So if you're set on a smaller town or village, consider remote work options or start planning how to bridge the gap between rural living and urban employment. Number 8. Complex immigration process. The immigration process is one of the biggest hurdles you'll face. Post-Brexit, the UK has introduced stricter and more complex immigration laws, especially for those coming from outside the EU. The process has become more bureaucratic, and securing a work visa, residency, or student status isn't as simple as it once was. Let's start with work visas. In the past, anyone could easily move to the UK for a job, but now you'll need to meet specific criteria. The skilled worker visa, which is one of the most common ways to gain entry, requires you to have a job offer from a licensed sponsor, and that job must meet certain salary thresholds. For example, the minimum salary requirement for most roles is £26,200 per year, unless you're in a role on the shortage occupation list, like healthcare. If your job doesn't meet this salary requirement, you'll either have to negotiate with your employer or face the tough decision of finding a job that does. For those coming to study, things have become complicated as well. The UK now has stricter visa requirements for international students, including proving you have enough money to support yourself, paying higher tuition fees, and navigating a maze of visa paperwork. The new graduate visa offers an exciting pathway for students who complete their degree in the UK to stay and work for up to 2 years. But even that requires careful planning and meeting multiple requirements. Moreover, navigating post-Brexit immigration changes means the rules are in constant flux. Visa requirements and application processes can change quickly, and it's vital to stay updated on the latest policies. If you're thinking of moving to the UK, you'll need to invest time and effort into understanding these complex immigration laws or risk wasting months on an unsuccessful application. In short, immigration to the UK in 2025 is not a simple or quick process. Be ready for paperwork, waiting times, and potential setbacks. If you want to move to the UK, you'll need to be organised, patient, and prepared for a bit of red tape. Number 9. High crime rates in some areas. While the UK is often thought of as a relatively safe country, certain parts of it have seen a rise in crime. And this is something you should definitely consider before moving in 2025. It's important to note that crime rates can vary widely depending on the city or region, so while some areas are relatively safe, others might make you second-guess your decision. Let's start with violent crime. While violent crime rates have been generally lower than in some other countries, they've been on the rise in certain urban areas. Cities like London, Manchester, and Birmingham have seen increased incidents of knife crime, gang-related violence, and street assaults in recent years. London, in particular, has faced challenges with violent crime, especially in certain boroughs where youth gangs have become a real issue. If you're thinking of settling in these areas, it's important to research the safety levels of the neighbourhoods you're considering. Property crime is another concern. The UK, like many other countries, sees a fair amount of burglaries, car thefts, and pickpocketing, particularly in crowded city centres or tourist hotspots. While most of these crimes are non-violent, they can still be a major inconvenience, especially if you're new to the country and unfamiliar with the areas where crimes tend to be more prevalent. Then there's the problem of drug-related crime, which has become a serious issue in some towns and cities, particularly around nightlife districts or areas with socio-economic challenges. The rising use of drugs like cocaine and heroin has led to a surge in criminal activity, making certain parts of cities less desirable for newcomers. Number 10. Unpredictable political climate. The UK's political landscape has been anything but stable in recent years, and if you're moving there in 2025, this is something you'll need to consider. From Brexit to ongoing debates about the future of the Union, political uncertainty has become a significant feature of life in the UK. Let's start with Brexit, the referendum that fundamentally altered the UK's relationship with the rest of Europe. The process has left lasting economic and social impacts, and while the UK has officially left the EU, the effects are still being felt. For example, Immigration policies have shifted, trade agreements have been renegotiated, and even everyday imports and exports are more complex. For someone looking to settle in the UK, these changes could affect everything from the job market to the availability of certain goods and services. Then, there's the question of Scottish independence. Over the past decade, Scotland has been pushing for another referendum on independence, with a significant portion of the population advocating for breaking away from the rest of the UK. The political tension between England and Scotland has only grown in recent years, and the possibility of a second Scottish independence referendum could lead to further division and uncertainty. Furthermore, the UK's political parties often swing dramatically from one end of the spectrum to the other, making governance unpredictable. Whether it's a Conservative or Labour government in power, policies can change quickly, especially in areas like healthcare, taxes, and public spending. These frequent shifts can leave the public feeling uncertain about long-term plans or stability. If you're coming from a country with a more stable political system, the UK's ever-changing political climate could feel disorienting. Policy shifts, political unrest, and economic changes could make settling into the UK more complicated than you initially expected. In short, the political volatility in the UK could impact everything from job prospects to living costs and even your day-to-day life. Moving to the UK might mean navigating through an unpredictable political environment, something that could add stress to your overall relocation experience. So, there you have it, the harsh truths about life in the UK in 2025. From sky-high rent prices and limited job opportunities to the unpredictable weather and long healthcare waits, moving to the UK isn't as rosy as some might make it seem. And don't forget the ongoing political turmoil, which continues to create uncertainty in almost every aspect of life. Before you pack your bags and head for the UK, ask yourself if you're really prepared for the challenges that come with living there. Sure, the UK has its perks, the history, the culture, the charm of small towns, but those come with some serious trade-offs. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new adventure, but the reality might be a lot more complicated than you expect. That said, moving to the UK can still be a great experience if you go in with your eyes wide open. It's all about being prepared, managing your expectations, and knowing what you're getting into before making the leap. We put a lot of effort into bringing you the most honest and insightful content. So if you found this video helpful, show some love by hitting that subscribe button. It's just one click. Drop your thoughts or experiences in the comments because we really want to hear from you. Your opinions matter to us. Did you know that the UK is facing a debt crisis so massive it could collapse the entire economy? Right now, the UK's national debt has surpassed a staggering £2.5 trillion, and it's growing by the second. But here's the shocking part. Interest payments alone on this debt are eating up more money than we spend on healthcare or defence, essential services that we rely on every single day. This isn't some far-off financial nightmare. It's happening right now. And it's only getting worse. Imagine a future where public services like the NHS are stretched thin, where schools can't afford basic supplies, and where your hard-earned money doesn't go as far as it used to. What if I told you that the UK's cost of living crisis is only the beginning of what's coming? With inflation soaring, wages stagnating, and pension liabilities threatening to drain our future, we might already be on the edge of economic disaster. But it gets worse. The UK isn't just battling internal debt, it's facing a global storm of trade disruptions, rising energy costs, and a political system that can't seem to agree on a solution. So, are we heading for disaster, or is there a way out? Stick with us as we reveal the hidden truths behind the UK's financial crisis, and uncover the reasons why this might be the beginning of the end. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end to understand the full scope of what's at stake. Number 1. The skyrocketing national debt. The UK's national debt has been soaring at an alarming rate. Currently standing at over £2.7 trillion, this figure is more than 100% of the country's GDP, a threshold that signals deep financial strain. What does this really mean? In simple terms, it means that the UK owes more than it can produce in a whole year. This is not just a theoretical figure. It has real-world consequences that impact everyone, from government policy to your pocketbook. One of the most concerning aspects of this growing debt is the compounding nature of it. As the debt increases, so do the interest payments, creating a vicious cycle where more money is needed just to keep up with what's already owed. This makes it incredibly hard for the UK to reduce its debt burden without drastic cuts in public spending or huge increases in taxes. Over the last decade, government borrowing has spiked, largely driven by pandemic relief efforts, economic stimulus packages, and increased spending on social programs. While these actions were necessary in the short term, they've left the UK in a precarious financial position. With a national debt this large, the government has very limited room to manoeuvre when it comes to future economic crises. To make matters worse, the rising debt is eating into public funds, limiting the government's ability to invest in essential areas like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. This means fewer resources for vital services, further compounding the economic strain. In essence, the country is borrowing to maintain a standard of living, but that comes at the cost of long-term financial stability. As the debt continues to rise, the question remains: how will the UK manage its finances in the years ahead? Will it be able to reduce the burden, or are we heading toward financial disaster? Number 2. Interest payments are eating up the budget. As the UK's national debt continues to grow, one of the most concerning effects is the increasing burden of interest payments. Right now, the UK is set to spend over £120 billion annually just to service its debt. To put this into perspective, that's more than the entire NHS budget or what the country spends on defence. In other words, a huge chunk of the taxpayer money is not going towards public services or improving the economy, but simply keeping the wheels of the debt machine turning. The impact of these interest payments is compounded by rising interest rates. As the Bank of England raises rates to curb inflation, the cost of borrowing becomes more expensive, which directly affects the UK's ability to manage its debt. This isn't just a theoretical risk, it's already happening. Every time the interest rate goes up, the government is forced to pay more to cover the existing debt, which further limits its fiscal options. The real danger is that these escalating payments are eating into the government's budget, leaving less money for the things that matter most: public services. For example, in 2024, the UK will spend twice as much on debt interest than it does on its entire justice system. This means that essential services like healthcare, policing, and education are facing cuts or stagnation in funding, all because the government is increasingly shackled by the weight of its own debt. In the long term, this creates a serious dilemma. If debt interest continues to rise, it may push the government into making painful choices between paying off debt and funding vital services. This sets the stage for a crisis of confidence, as citizens start to feel the effects in their daily lives, from longer wait times in the NHS to crumbling infrastructure. Number 3. Inflation and the cost of living crisis. One of the most visible and pressing consequences of the UK's economic troubles is the ongoing cost of living crisis, driven largely by rising inflation. In recent years, inflation has been hovering at near double-digit levels, making everyday goods and services significantly more expensive. Whether it's groceries, fuel, or housing costs, Britons are feeling the pinch in nearly every aspect of their lives. Inflation erodes the purchasing power of money, meaning that what you could buy with £100 a year ago might cost you £110 today. This not only hurts households trying to stretch their budgets, but also creates a ripple effect throughout the economy. Businesses face higher input costs, which can lead to price hikes, reduced profits, or even closures. This in turn impacts employment levels and overall economic productivity. The government's response to this crisis has been sluggish, with critics arguing that policy inaction and a lack of clear strategy are making things worse. While central banks raise interest rates in an attempt to curb inflation, the government's financial support to struggling households has been limited, leaving many feeling abandoned. This disconnect between the economic policymakers and the everyday citizen exacerbates the crisis, creating social unrest and a growing sense of frustration. For many families, wages have not kept pace with inflation. This has led to a widening gap between income and living costs, making it harder for the average person to afford basic necessities. The housing market, for example, has seen prices and rents soar, while wages stagnate, trapping many in a cycle of debt and financial instability. Ultimately, if inflation continues unchecked, it could lead to widespread social instability and even a potential economic recession. As the cost of living spirals, more and more people may find themselves struggling to make ends meet, pushing the country closer to a full-blown financial disaster. Number 4. Political instability and uncertainty. In the face of a growing financial crisis, the political instability in the UK has only made matters worse. Over the past few years, the country has experienced a series of leadership changes, with multiple prime ministers taking office within short periods of time. This revolving door of political leadership has created an environment of uncertainty and instability, leaving citizens and investors questioning the direction of the nation. When a country faces a debt crisis, strong, consistent leadership is critical. Yet the UK has seen a lack of long-term vision in economic policy, with successive governments struggling to form a clear and coherent plan for tackling the nation's financial problems. The frequent changes in leadership mean that policies are often inconsistent and difficult to implement, leading to a sense of confusion both at home and abroad. This political volatility has a direct impact on the economy. In uncertain times, businesses are reluctant to invest or expand, knowing that the future of their operations could be affected by sudden shifts in government policy. Foreign investors, too, may hesitate to commit to the UK market, fearing the risks associated with a shaky political landscape. As a result, the UK's growth potential is stifled, leaving the economy more vulnerable to both domestic and global shocks. Moreover, the lack of a unified approach to the debt crisis has led to political gridlock, with little consensus on how to resolve the issue. Some propose austerity measures, while others push for increased public spending. This division has made it incredibly difficult to pass meaningful reforms that could address the root causes of the crisis, further deepening the nation's economic woes. As long as political instability continues, the UK will struggle to find a clear path out of its financial troubles, potentially putting the nation on a path to economic disaster. Number 5. Pension liabilities and unfunded promises. The UK is facing an enormous pension crisis that could unravel its financial stability in the coming decades. The country's pension system is built on unfunded promises, meaning that the government has promised far more in benefits than it has saved or set aside to pay for them. As a result, the UK's pension liabilities are projected to reach trillions in the coming years, creating an overwhelming burden for future generations. This issue is largely driven by the ageing population. With life expectancy increasing, more people are living longer, requiring more substantial payouts from the pension system. At the same time, the birth rate has fallen, leading to a smaller workforce contributing to the system. This imbalance means fewer workers are available to fund the pensions of an increasingly large retiree population. The result is a growing funding gap that could threaten the sustainability of the entire system. Adding to this concern is the fact that pension payments, which account for a significant portion of government spending, are largely unfunded, meaning they're paid for using current tax revenue rather than from pre-existing savings. This is putting immense strain on the public finances, and with the national debt already at critical levels, it's becoming harder for the government to meet these obligations without further borrowing. The pension crisis also has long-term implications for the workforce. Younger generations are becoming increasingly aware that they may have to work longer or save more on their own to secure a retirement, given the uncertainty surrounding future pensions. In the worst-case scenario, if the government can't meet its pension obligations, it could lead to severe social unrest, as retirees and workers alike face the consequences of broken promises. The looming pension crisis represents a ticking time bomb for the UK's economy, and without immediate action, it could become one of the biggest contributors to the nation's financial collapse. Number 6. Decline of public services. As the UK's national debt continues to rise, it's becoming increasingly difficult for the government to maintain the quality and accessibility of its public services. Key sectors like healthcare, education, and transportation are all feeling the strain as financial resources become scarcer. The result is a decline in service quality that directly impacts the lives of ordinary citizens. One of the most glaring examples is the NHS. With the government dedicating an ever larger portion of its budget to servicing debt, healthcare funding has become increasingly limited. This has led to longer waiting times for appointments, reduced access to specialised care, and staff shortages across the system. The NHS, which has long been a pillar of the British welfare state, is now struggling to meet the needs of a growing and ageing population. This situation puts immense pressure on healthcare professionals and leaves patients waiting months for essential treatments. Similarly, education is suffering under the weight of austerity measures and stagnant funding. Schools are facing cuts to essential programs, teachers are being overworked, and many educational facilities are in desperate need of repair. This decline in the quality of education impacts not only the current generation of students, but also the UK's future workforce, which will be crucial in addressing the nation's long-term economic challenges. Public transportation is also showing signs of wear and tear. In major cities, overcrowded trains and buses, as well as poorly maintained infrastructure, have become the norm. As the government's ability to fund and maintain infrastructure projects diminishes, commuting becomes more difficult and less efficient, contributing to further economic slowdowns. With fewer resources for these essential services, the UK's social fabric is slowly deteriorating. A society that once prided itself on its public services is now facing the uncomfortable reality of austerity, where basic services are no longer guaranteed at the level they once were. Number 7. Economic growth stagnation. One of the most concerning signs of the UK's financial decline is the ongoing economic stagnation. Despite various efforts to boost productivity and innovation, the country's growth has been consistently sluggish over the past decade. This stagnation is a direct result of a range of factors, including political instability, high debt levels, and a lack of investment in critical sectors that could drive future prosperity. The UK has long been considered a major global economic power, but its productivity growth has been lagging behind other nations. This is partly due to a low investment environment, where businesses are hesitant to commit to long-term projects amid the uncertainty of Brexit, political upheaval, and rising global tensions. Without the influx of new ideas, technologies, and infrastructure, the UK has struggled to remain competitive on the world stage, especially in key industries like manufacturing, tech, and green energy. Additionally, the UK's reliance on consumer spending to drive economic activity has created an unsustainable growth model. While consumer spending helps prop up the economy in the short term, it is not a long-term solution for boosting economic health. There has been insufficient focus on innovation and high-value industries that could create jobs, improve productivity, and increase exports. With an aging population and rising labour costs, it has become more challenging to grow the workforce in a meaningful way. The UK is also grappling with skills gaps, where many sectors simply cannot find the talent needed to thrive. The education system struggles to keep up with the demand for highly skilled workers, leading to lower productivity levels. As economic growth continues to stagnate, the UK's long-term prospects are increasingly uncertain. The economy cannot continue relying on outdated models of growth, and without a shift towards innovation, investment, and more sustainable development, the country faces a future of financial vulnerability. Number 8. Global economic pressures. The UK is not operating in a vacuum. It's part of a global economic system that is being increasingly shaped by external pressures, many of which are pushing the country further into crisis. From trade wars to supply chain disruptions and rising energy prices, global factors are exacerbating the UK's financial struggles and making it harder to find stability. Brexit alone has significantly impacted the UK's trade relationships, particularly with its closest neighbour, the European Union. The disruption to trade, alongside new barriers to the free movement of goods and services, has hurt British businesses that once relied on smooth access to EU markets. The red tape and logistical hurdles have led to higher costs for businesses, which are inevitably passed down to consumers in the form of higher prices. Simultaneously, global inflation has been on the rise, largely driven by increased energy prices and disruptions in supply chains. As the war in Ukraine continues, the cost of energy, especially natural gas and oil, has soared. The UK, with its reliance on energy imports, has found itself caught in the middle of rising global prices. This adds significant pressure to both households and businesses, as energy costs become an increasingly significant portion of spending. Without affordable energy, industries cannot thrive, and individuals are forced to sacrifice other expenses just to keep their homes heated. On top of this, global supply chains remain fragile, especially in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Shortages of everything from electronics to foodstuffs have led to price hikes, further fueling inflation. The UK's economy, already teetering on the edge, is unable to absorb these shocks without significant economic strain. With these external pressures mounting, the UK faces the risk of being swept up in global instability with little room for recovery or growth. Without a more resilient strategy to weather these external shocks, the UK is heading into increasingly uncertain financial waters. Number 9. Declining investment in key sectors. A major factor contributing to the UK's economic troubles is the decline in investment across crucial sectors that drive long-term growth. Historically, sectors like manufacturing, technology, and infrastructure have been the backbone of economic expansion. However, over the past decade, the UK has seen a significant decrease in both foreign and domestic investment, leaving the country vulnerable to global competition. One of the most noticeable areas of decline is manufacturing, which has faced a steady downturn. Once a pillar of the UK economy, manufacturing now represents a smaller portion of GDP than it did in previous decades. A lack of investment in cutting-edge manufacturing technologies has meant that many industries in the UK are falling behind other countries, particularly in sectors like automotive production and electronics. Without modern factories, skilled workers, and innovation, these industries are unable to maintain competitive advantages, which leads to job losses and a weaker economy. The technology sector has also suffered from insufficient investment. Despite the UK's status as a financial hub, its tech industry has struggled to match the levels of funding and innovation seen in other countries, particularly in Silicon Valley. The lack of support for startups, as well as high corporate tax rates and stringent regulations, have made it harder for tech companies to flourish. This hampers the country's ability to diversify its economy and create the high-paying, sustainable jobs that could reduce reliance on debt and consumer spending. Finally, infrastructure investment has been a long-standing issue. Transport systems, housing development, and green energy projects all suffer from underfunding. As a result, the UK is facing congestion, housing shortages, and energy inefficiencies that not only hurt the quality of life, but also make it more difficult for businesses to operate smoothly. In sum, the decline in investment across these critical sectors leaves the UK vulnerable to stagnation and economic decline, making it increasingly difficult to escape its mounting financial troubles. Number 10. Rising income inequality. A significant but often overlooked factor contributing to the UK's debt crisis is the growing issue of income inequality. As the gap between the wealthy and the rest of the population continues to widen, the economic system becomes increasingly unbalanced and unsustainable. The wealthy, with their large financial portfolios, pay a much lower percentage of their income in taxes compared to the working and middle classes, which exacerbates the country's debt problem. The effects of rising income inequality are twofold. First, when a large portion of the population has limited purchasing power, it creates a drag on economic growth. Consumer spending drives the UK economy, but as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, there's less overall demand for goods and services. This weakens business performance, reduces tax revenues, and further limits government spending on public services and social programs. The lack of adequate spending power in the middle class and poor households means they contribute less to the economy, leading to economic stagnation. Second, income inequality exacerbates social tensions, which can lead to instability. When people feel that the system is rigged against them, trust in political and economic institutions erodes, potentially leading to unrest. A population divided by wealth disparity is less likely to support long-term solutions to the country's debt problems. Instead, frustration may boil over into protests, or worse, a breakdown in civil order. This inequality trap ultimately deepens the financial crisis. The wealthiest individuals and corporations may find ways to protect their wealth through loopholes, while the burden of national debt and rising taxes falls disproportionately on those who can least afford it. In the long run, this kind of economic inequality undermines the country's stability, making it even harder to solve the debt crisis effectively. As you can see, the UK is standing on the edge of a financial precipice, and the consequences of inaction are dire. From soaring inflation to the collapse of public services, the signs are clear. If we don't address these issues now, the UK could face a future of economic instability and social unrest. But here's the thing, it's not too late. Awareness is the first step to change, and by understanding these hidden truths, we can start pushing for the reforms that are needed to protect the country's financial future. The question is, what will we do about it? Will we continue to let the debt spiral out of control? Or will we rise to the challenge and demand action? The power lies in our hands. If you found this video eye-opening, take a moment to like, subscribe, and join our growing community of informed viewers who want to understand what's really happening in the world. Your one click means we can keep bringing you more in-depth, high-effort videos that will help you stay ahead of the curve. Did you know that over 5 million people are expected to leave the UK in 2025? That's like the entire population of Scotland packing up and moving out. But here's the real question. Why are so many people desperate to leave? Is it the skyrocketing cost of living? The failing healthcare system? The crime rates climbing in major cities? Or is it something even bigger? A sign that the UK is no longer the place it once was. Think about it. Energy bills are through the roof, wages aren't keeping up, and home ownership feels impossible. Even professionals with stable jobs are finding it hard to get by. And with Brexit's lasting impact, political instability, and rising taxes, it's no wonder people are looking for a way out. But where are they going? Countries like Canada, Australia, and Germany are offering better pay, lower taxes, and a higher quality of life. In Spain and Portugal, expats are finding cheaper housing, safer communities, and a better work-life balance. So, is the UK really heading for a mass exodus? And more importantly, should you consider leaving too? Stay tuned, because in this video, we're breaking down the 10 biggest reasons why people are fleeing the UK and where they're going next. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Number 1. Cost of living crisis. The cost of living crisis is one of the biggest reasons why millions of people are considering leaving the UK in 2025. Over the past few years, everyday expenses have skyrocketed, making it harder for families and individuals to afford even the basics. Rent, food, transportation, and energy bills have all surged, leaving many people struggling to make ends meet. One of the biggest culprits? Inflation. Prices have been rising at their fastest rate in decades, but wages haven't kept up. This means that even those with stable jobs are finding it harder to cover basic expenses. A recent study showed that the average UK household now spends over £2,000 more per year on essential goods than they did just a few years ago. Groceries alone have seen double-digit price hikes, making a simple shopping trip a financial burden. Housing costs are another major issue. Whether renting or buying, the UK's property market is becoming increasingly unaffordable. Rents have surged by 10 to 15% in major cities like London, Manchester, and Birmingham, while home ownership is slipping out of reach for many. Even those who can afford a mortgage are facing record high interest rates, making monthly payments significantly more expensive than before. Meanwhile, energy prices remain at crisis levels. Many households are paying hundreds of pounds more per month just to heat their homes. Even government subsidies haven't been enough to offset the burden, forcing many to choose between heating and other essentials. With the UK's cost of living spiralling out of control, it's no surprise that many people are looking at alternative countries where their money will go further, and they can enjoy a higher standard of living. For many, leaving the UK isn't just an option, it's becoming a necessity. Number 2. Skyrocketing energy prices. One of the biggest financial burdens forcing people to consider leaving the UK is the soaring cost of energy. Over the past few years, gas and electricity prices have reached record highs, making it increasingly difficult for households to keep up with their monthly bills. For many, heating their homes during the winter has become a luxury rather than a necessity. The UK's over-reliance on imported energy has made the country particularly vulnerable to global price fluctuations. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, natural gas prices surged, leading to higher costs for UK households. While other European nations implemented long-term strategies to reduce dependency on external energy sources, the UK has struggled to provide a stable and affordable supply. Energy bills have nearly doubled for some households, with many now paying hundreds of pounds more per month just to maintain a basic standard of living. Even government support schemes such as energy price caps and subsidies have failed to provide enough relief, leaving millions struggling to cover their bills. This has led to a growing trend of energy poverty, where families are forced to cut back on heating, cooking, and even electricity usage to save money. Businesses have also been hit hard, especially in energy-intensive industries like manufacturing and hospitality. Rising operational costs are forcing many small businesses to shut down or relocate to countries with cheaper energy rates. This not only impacts business owners, but also leads to job losses and economic instability. With no long-term solution in sight and prices expected to remain high, many UK residents are looking abroad for more affordable living conditions. Countries like Spain, Portugal, and Canada offer lower energy costs and milder climates, making them attractive options for those tired of paying a fortune just to stay warm. Number 3. Housing affordability crisis. The UK's housing market has become a major factor driving people to leave the country. Whether you're renting or trying to buy a home, housing costs have spiraled out of control, making it nearly impossible for many to secure stable and affordable living arrangements. As a result, people are looking for alternatives abroad where they can actually afford a decent home without sacrificing their entire paycheck. For renters, the situation is dire. In cities like London, Manchester, and Birmingham, rents have surged by 10 to 15% in just a year, forcing many to downgrade their living situations or move further away from work. Some tenants have even reported bidding wars just to secure a flat, a phenomenon that was once rare outside of home purchases. The demand far outweighs the supply, and landlords are increasing prices faster than wages can keep up. For potential homeowners, the dream of buying a house is slipping further away. House prices have more than doubled in the past 2 decades, and with mortgage rates hitting record highs, even those who managed to save a deposit are now struggling to afford monthly payments. According to recent data, the average house price in the UK now sits at over £300,000, while in London it's well over £500,000, figures that are simply unrealistic for many young professionals and families. In contrast, countries like Spain, Portugal, Canada, and Australia offer cheaper housing, lower mortgage rates, and better rent control policies. Many UK residents are realising they can enjoy a higher standard of living abroad for a fraction of what they're paying here. If housing remains this unaffordable, expect more people to pack up and leave for good. Why struggle in the UK when you can live better elsewhere? Number 4. Stagnant wages and job insecurity. One of the biggest reasons millions of people are considering leaving the UK in 2025 is the widening gap between wages and the cost of living. While expenses continue to rise at a record pace, salaries have barely increased, leaving many workers struggling to make ends meet. For professionals, young workers, and even experienced employees, the UK job market is no longer providing the financial security it once did. The biggest problem? Wages aren't keeping up with inflation. Even those in high-skilled industries like tech, finance, and healthcare are seeing their earnings lose value as everyday expenses surge. According to the Office for National Statistics, real wages have been falling for years, meaning that even pay raises aren't enough to offset rising costs. Many workers now find themselves working longer hours for less purchasing power, making it harder to save, invest, or even afford basic necessities. Job security is another major concern. Post-Brexit labour shortages, automation, and economic uncertainty have led to more temporary contracts, fewer benefits, and unpredictable employment conditions. Many industries, such as retail, hospitality, and even healthcare, are struggling to provide stable career paths. The rise of the gig economy and zero-hour contracts has made employment even more precarious, leaving workers without long-term financial stability. Countries like Canada, Germany, and Australia offer better wages, stronger labour protections, and more opportunities for career growth. Many skilled professionals are choosing to relocate to places where their work is more valued and their salaries actually keep up with living costs. If the UK job market doesn't improve, expect a brain drain, as thousands of skilled workers take their talents elsewhere in search of better pay and job security. Why stay in a system that isn't rewarding your hard work? Number 5. Brexit's long-term effects. Brexit was meant to give the UK more control over its economy, borders, and laws. But for many, the reality has been far more difficult than expected, and it's one of the key reasons why millions are considering leaving the country in 2025. The economic, trade, and immigration impacts of Brexit have made life harder, not easier, for businesses, workers, and families alike. One of the biggest long-term effects has been trade restrictions and rising costs. The UK's departure from the EU meant leaving the single market, which has led to increased tariffs, customs checks, and import-export delays. Businesses that once thrived on frictionless trade with Europe now face higher costs and bureaucratic hurdles, making it harder to compete internationally. These disruptions have directly impacted consumers as well, with higher prices on imported goods, from food to electronics. Another major issue is the shortage of skilled workers. Before Brexit, many industries, especially healthcare, construction, and hospitality, relied heavily on EU workers. But with stricter immigration rules, many skilled professionals have either left or chosen not to move to the UK at all. This has led to labour shortages, slower services, and increased pressure on British workers, all while wages fail to keep up with inflation. Meanwhile, economic uncertainty has weakened foreign investment in the UK. Many global companies have relocated headquarters and jobs to EU nations to avoid Brexit-related complications, resulting in fewer job opportunities at home. With better career prospects, lower costs, and fewer bureaucratic hurdles abroad, many UK residents, both British citizens and former EU nationals, are making the choice to leave. If Brexit was meant to improve life in the UK, why are so many people looking for an exit? Number 6. Declining healthcare system, NHS crisis. For decades, the National Health Service, NHS, was one of the UK's proudest achievements. But today, it's in crisis mode, and the situation is pushing many people, especially healthcare professionals, to leave the country in search of better opportunities. Long waiting times, staff shortages, and funding cuts have made it harder than ever to access quality medical care, leaving both patients and doctors frustrated. One of the biggest issues is overwhelming patient demand. The UK's growing and ageing population means more people need medical care, but the NHS is severely underfunded. Many patients are facing months-long waits for specialist appointments and surgeries, while overcrowded hospitals struggle to manage rising admissions. In many cases, even getting a routine GP appointment can take weeks. At the same time, thousands of NHS staff are quitting due to burnout, low wages, and extreme working conditions. Nurses, doctors, and healthcare workers are leaving the UK for countries like Australia, Canada, and the UAE, where they can earn higher salaries, enjoy better working conditions, and have a healthier work-life balance. The UK's overworked healthcare workforce is stretched thin, and without enough staff, the system is collapsing under its own weight. Meanwhile, private healthcare is becoming the only option for those who can afford it, creating a two-tier healthcare system where the wealthy get faster treatment while the average citizen struggles to access care. For many people, a functional healthcare system is a basic necessity, and if they can't rely on the NHS anymore, leaving the UK for a country with better medical services and shorter wait times becomes an easy choice. If the government doesn't address these problems soon, the UK could see an even bigger exodus of both healthcare workers and frustrated patients. Number 7. Rising crime and safety concerns. Safety is one of the most important factors when deciding where to live, and for many in the UK, crime rates are becoming a growing concern. Over the past few years, there has been a noticeable rise in violent crime, burglaries, and antisocial behaviour, leaving many residents feeling uneasy about their future in the country. As safety declines, more people are looking for better, more secure alternatives abroad. One of the biggest concerns is the rise in violent crime. Knife crime, gang-related violence, and assaults have increased in major cities like London, Birmingham, and Manchester, making many areas feel unsafe, especially at night. According to police reports, knife crime has risen by over 50% in the last decade, and many young people feel trapped in unsafe communities. Muggings, theft, and break-ins are also on the rise, making residents feel more vulnerable in their own homes. At the same time, police forces are underfunded and overstretched. Budget cuts and staff shortages mean fewer officers on the streets, longer response times, and a weaker ability to prevent crime before it happens. Many communities feel law enforcement isn't doing enough, and with resources spread thin, criminals are taking advantage of the situation. Beyond violent crime, petty crime, and antisocial behaviour are also growing problems. Shoplifting, vandalism, and public disturbances have become common, creating an environment where people no longer feel safe walking alone at night. Countries like Canada, Japan, and Switzerland offer much lower crime rates, better policing, and a greater sense of community security. As concerns about safety in the UK continue to grow, many families and professionals are deciding that it's time to move to a place where they feel safer and more protected. Number 8. High taxes and poor public services. The UK has some of the highest taxes in the world, yet many people feel they're not getting value for their money. As the cost of living rises, so do taxes, putting even more pressure on households and businesses. But despite these high taxes, public services like healthcare, transport, and education are declining in quality, leaving many residents frustrated and looking for better options abroad. One of the biggest complaints is income tax and national insurance contributions. Workers in the UK can lose up to 40 to 45% of their earnings in taxes if they fall into higher income brackets, while self-employed individuals often face even more deductions. At the same time, businesses are struggling with corporation tax hikes, making the UK less attractive for entrepreneurs and investors. In comparison, countries like Dubai, Singapore, and even Portugal offer lower taxes and better incentives for workers and business owners. Meanwhile, public services are failing despite record tax revenues. The NHS is overwhelmed, public transport is unreliable and expensive, and education funding is being cut, making life harder for families and workers. Many people wonder why they're paying so much in taxes but getting so little in return. The transportation system, in particular, has become a major issue. Rail fares are some of the highest in Europe, and frequent train strikes have caused widespread frustration. Buses and other public transport services are also unreliable, overcrowded, and expensive, making daily commuting a nightmare. With other countries offering lower taxes, better public services, and higher living standards, many UK residents are deciding that their hard-earned money would go much further elsewhere. If taxes keep rising while services continue to decline, expect even more people to leave in search of a better quality of life. Number 9. Political instability and uncertainty. The UK has been caught in a cycle of political chaos, and for many, the constant uncertainty is becoming too much to handle. Over the past few years, the country has seen frequent leadership changes, shifting policies, and growing public dissatisfaction, leaving people feeling unsure about the future. This instability is a major reason why many are considering leaving the UK in 2025. One of the biggest issues is constant government turnover. Since 2016, the UK has had 5 different prime ministers, each with different economic strategies and policies. This lack of consistency has made it difficult for businesses and individuals to plan for the future. Many people feel that politicians are out of touch with real economic struggles, and instead of fixing problems, they are making things worse with poor decision-making. Another concern is economic mismanagement. Frequent changes in tax policies, spending cuts, and controversial decisions like Brexit have created uncertainty in almost every sector. Businesses are hesitant to invest, and workers feel like their financial future is unpredictable. The UK's economic policies seem to change with every new government, making it one of the least stable economies in Europe. Public dissatisfaction is also growing. Strikes, protests, and demonstrations have become a regular occurrence, with many workers, students, and public service employees demanding better pay and conditions. Frustration with the government is at an all-time high, and many feel that nothing is being done to improve their quality of life. In contrast, countries like Canada, Germany, and Australia offer more political stability, clear economic policies, and a stronger sense of direction. With so much uncertainty in the UK, many are choosing to relocate to places where they can feel more secure about their future. If the government can't restore stability, the UK will continue to lose its people. Number 10. Better opportunities abroad. For many UK residents, the decision to leave isn't just about escaping problems, it's about finding better opportunities elsewhere. Countries like Canada, Australia, Germany, and the UAE are offering higher salaries, lower taxes, better public services, and an overall higher quality of life, making them attractive alternatives to life in the UK. One of the biggest factors driving emigration is higher wages and better job prospects. While wages in the UK have stagnated, many countries are actively recruiting skilled workers with higher pay, better benefits, and stronger worker protections. For example, healthcare professionals, IT specialists, and engineers can often earn significantly more in Canada or Germany while enjoying lower living costs. Lower taxes are another major draw. Countries like the UAE and Singapore have zero or significantly lower income taxes, meaning workers take home more of their earnings. For business owners and entrepreneurs, countries with fewer regulations and lower corporate taxes are proving to be a better place to grow their wealth. Beyond money, quality of life plays a huge role. Many other countries offer cheaper housing, better healthcare systems, lower crime rates, and more work-life balance. In places like Spain and Portugal, British expats are finding they can live more comfortably on lower salaries due to reduced costs of living and sunnier, less stressful environments. Finally, stronger immigration policies in other countries are making it easier than ever for UK residents to relocate. Countries like Australia and Canada actively invite skilled workers, offering fast-track visas and residency programs for those looking to start a new life. With all these benefits available abroad, many people are asking themselves, why struggle in the UK when I can live better somewhere else? For millions, the answer is clear. It's time to move on. So, there you have it. 10 powerful reasons why 5 million people may leave the UK in 2025. From rising living costs and job insecurity to failing public services and better opportunities abroad, it's clear why so many are looking for a fresh start. But the real question is, what about you? Are you staying to ride out the storm? Or are you already planning your next move? Maybe you've noticed some of these struggles firsthand. High taxes, unaffordable housing, or a crumbling NHS. Or perhaps you've already left and found a better life elsewhere. Let's start a conversation. Tell us in the comments, if you could move anywhere, where would you go and why? We put a lot of effort into bringing you these insights, so if you found this video valuable, smash that like button and hit subscribe. It's just one click, but it helps us keep creating content like this. See you in the next one. Did you know that 1 in 5 UK residents is considering leaving the country by 2030? That's right. Millions are planning to escape what many believe is a falling economy, rising crime, and a struggling healthcare system. But what if we told you that the UK you know today might be unrecognisable in just a few years? Housing costs are skyrocketing, job opportunities are disappearing, and the UK's political future seems more uncertain than ever. So why wait until it's too late? You're probably asking yourself, why leave the UK when it's still home? Well, hold on. By the end of this video, you'll understand why staying might not be the smartest choice for your future. The cost of living is out of control, with everyday expenses becoming harder to manage, and by 2030, it might be impossible to afford the life you want. But it's not just about money. We're talking about a decline in education, a weakened healthcare system, and rising crime rates. A perfect storm, brewing that could leave you struggling to survive. But it's not all doom and gloom. Stick around as we dive into 10 reasons why leaving the UK before 2030 might be your best bet for securing a better life, safer environment, and a brighter future. Trust us. You won't want to miss this. Number 1. Rising cost of living. One of the most pressing reasons you might want to leave the UK before 2030 is the ever-increasing cost of living. Over the past decade, the financial pressure on residents has grown tremendously, and the next decade doesn't look any better. From soaring housing costs to rising utility bills, the UK is becoming an increasingly expensive place to live, particularly in major cities like London, Manchester, and Birmingham. Housing's one of the biggest contributors to this financial burden. Property prices have been steadily climbing, making home ownership a distant dream for many. In fact, house prices have surged by over 50% in the past 10 years alone. As a result, Rent prices are also skyrocketing, leaving many people with little to no disposable income after covering their housing expenses. By 2030, it's predicted that the UK's housing market will become even more unaffordable, and the dream of buying a home might be out of reach for most. But it's not just property prices. Everyday living expenses are increasing too. From the weekly grocery shop to transportation costs, the average person is feeling the strain. Energy prices have also been on the rise, and gas and electricity bills are expected to increase even further in the coming years. If you're already struggling to make ends meet, imagine the pressure when costs continue to rise at this rate. For many, the dream of a comfortable life in the UK is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. If these financial pressures aren't addressed, it could lead to a future where only the wealthiest can afford to live comfortably, while the middle and lower classes face even greater financial strain. If you're considering your future, now might be the time to explore other countries where the cost of living is more manageable. Number 2. Political instability and uncertainty. The political landscape in the UK has been shifting dramatically over the past few years, and experts predict that the uncertainty and instability will only increase as we approach 2018-2030. With ongoing issues like Brexit, fluctuating government leadership, and rising political divisions, the country may face a future that's far less predictable and stable than it once was. The aftermath of Brexit has left the UK with unresolved economic, trade, and diplomatic challenges. Despite leaving the European Union, the long-term effects continue to unfold, particularly in trade agreements and foreign relations. As the UK navigates its new role on the global stage, there's no telling how future negotiations might unfold. This uncertainty makes long-term planning a gamble, especially when it comes to businesses, foreign investments, and job security. With every policy shift or new regulation, it feels like the UK's position is constantly in flux. Add to this the political gridlock and constant changes in leadership, and the future looks even more unpredictable. With parties becoming more polarised and divided, it's difficult to imagine a future where political stability is guaranteed. Public dissatisfaction with government policies is at an all-time high, and protests over economic policies, social issues, and healthcare are becoming increasingly common. As the next general elections approach, many wonder if the country will face more turmoil, or if there will be effective reforms to address the growing tensions. If these issues aren't resolved soon, the UK could see further economic stagnation and social unrest in the coming decade. In short, the political instability in the UK is creating a cloud of uncertainty over the future. With no clear direction or resolution in sight, this environment could lead many to seriously reconsider their future in the UK by 2030. Number 3. Climate change and environmental decline. Climate change is no longer just a future concern. Its impacts are already being felt across the globe, and the UK is no exception. If you're considering leaving the UK before 2030, the environmental threats facing the country might be one of the most pressing reasons to act. The UK is experiencing increasingly extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and more frequent flooding, all of which could make life in some areas far more difficult in the coming decade. One of the most significant threats is flooding. Coastal cities like London, Liverpool, and Cardiff are at risk of rising sea levels, which could cause widespread damage to property, infrastructure, and homes. According to experts, rising sea levels could affect low-lying areas, submerging valuable land and forcing communities to relocate. Flooding is expected to become more frequent and severe, particularly in the south of England. Homes in these regions could become uninsurable, leaving residents vulnerable and unable to recover from environmental disasters. In addition to coastal flooding, the UK is experiencing more extreme weather than ever before. Heat waves, droughts, and storms are becoming more common, making daily life more unpredictable. For instance, 2021 saw record-breaking heat waves that put pressure on water supplies, agriculture, and public health systems. If this trend continues, we could see severe water shortages, agricultural failures, and energy supply issues, all of which could affect the quality of life for millions of people. Furthermore, the UK is facing a decline in biodiversity, with pollution and habitat destruction threatening native species. The government's ability to manage environmental crises is limited, and some areas may face a future where climate-related challenges become a daily struggle. If you're concerned about living in an environment that's increasingly unpredictable, climate change could be a major reason to reconsider your future in the UK. Other countries with more resilient infrastructures or better climate management strategies might offer a safer, more sustainable future. Number 4. Declining healthcare services. The NHS, once a pillar of pride for the UK, is increasingly under pressure, and by 2030 it may struggle to provide the level of care that the country has come to expect. If you're considering whether to leave the UK, the declining quality of healthcare could be one of the most significant factors to weigh in, with issues like staff shortages, long wait times, and limited funding. The future of the NHS is uncertain, and many are predicting a healthcare crisis on the horizon. Staff shortages in the NHS are already a major issue. According to reports, the NHS is facing a severe shortage of doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals. Thousands of vacancies remain unfilled, and the situation is expected to worsen in the coming years. Many healthcare workers are leaving the profession due to burnout, poor working conditions, and low pay. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated these issues, and the demand for healthcare services has only increased, putting even more strain on an already overstretched system. This shortage means that you could face longer waiting times for appointments, procedures, and even emergency care, as fewer healthcare workers are available to meet growing demand. In addition to staffing issues, funding cuts and underinvestment in the NHS have led to declining standards of care. Hospitals and clinics are becoming increasingly underfunded, and resources are stretched thin. The lack of investment in infrastructure means outdated equipment and facilities, which impacts the quality of care patients receive. In some areas, healthcare services are being reduced, leading to less access to vital treatments and services. For those living in areas with already strained healthcare systems, the future could mean poorer care and more limited access to healthcare services. If the NHS continues to face these challenges, private healthcare or relocating to countries with more reliable healthcare systems could become more appealing options. The uncertainty of healthcare in the UK means that many people may need to seriously consider alternative countries where they can access more consistent and quality healthcare. Number 5. Limited job opportunities for the next generation. The job market in the UK has been under increasing strain, and experts predict that by 2030, it will become even more difficult for young professionals to secure stable, well-paying jobs. If you're considering staying in the UK, the lack of job opportunities and the rise of automation might make you rethink your decision. With the world evolving rapidly, especially in the wake of technological advances and global competition, the UK's job market could become far less accommodating for the next generation. Automation is already replacing jobs across multiple industries, from retail to manufacturing and even finance. By 2030, jobs in sectors like customer service, data entry, and transportation are likely to be automated to a much greater degree. AI and machine learning are changing the way businesses operate, and many entry-level roles are becoming obsolete. This will leave many young people struggling to find work in fields that once offered promising career paths. In addition, workers may be forced to retrain for highly specialised roles, creating a growing skills gap that will make it harder for the general population to stay competitive in the workforce. On top of automation, the UK is facing a lack of opportunities for young professionals in key sectors. Graduates are finding it more difficult to break into industries like engineering, media, and technology as competition rises and the job market becomes more saturated. Graduate schemes and internships are limited, and unpaid positions are becoming more common. making it harder for young people to gain experience and financial independence. Meanwhile, many young entrepreneurs are turning to countries with better support systems for startups and businesses, where tax incentives, lower costs of living, and more vibrant economies make it easier to grow a business. For young people looking for better career opportunities, the UK might not be the best place to build their future. In summary, the future job market in the UK looks increasingly challenging, particularly for the younger generation. With automation and global competition creating barriers, it might be worth considering other countries that offer more promising career paths and a higher quality of life. Number 6. High taxes and economic burden. As the UK faces a variety of economic challenges, one factor that could drive more people to consider leaving the country before 2030 is the increasing tax burden. With rising costs of living, a struggling healthcare system, and growing public debt, the UK government may have no choice but to raise taxes in the coming years. For individuals and families already grappling with high living expenses, this added financial pressure could become unsustainable, making relocation to countries with lower taxes and better economic conditions a more appealing option. The UK's tax system, already one of the higher tax regimes in the developed world, could see increases in areas such as income tax, national insurance contributions, property tax, and capital gains tax. As the government attempts to address national debt and cover the costs of public services, these hikes could significantly affect the average person's take-home pay. For middle-income earners, these increases could mean the difference between financial stability and financial strain. Additionally, as the government focuses on economic recovery post-pandemic and attempts to address climate change, carbon taxes and other environmental levies are likely to increase. While this could help in the long term, in the short term, it would place even more strain on already tight household budgets. If energy prices rise, combined with higher taxes, many households might find it difficult to manage both their everyday living expenses and long-term savings. The wealthy may also face higher taxes, with new measures aimed at reducing economic inequality. But these increases could discourage investment and savings and lead to potential capital flight. Many business owners and high net worth individuals may look to relocate to countries with lower tax rates and better incentives. For those seeking to reduce their financial burdens, countries with lower taxes and a more manageable cost of living could offer better opportunities for long-term financial security. With the UK's financial strain expected to intensify, it may be time to consider relocating to a nation with a more favourable economic climate. Number 7. Increasing crime rates and social tensions. Another major factor to consider if you're thinking about leaving the UK before 2030 is the rising crime rates and social tensions that are becoming more evident in several areas. While crime is a concern for any country, the UK's crime rates have been steadily climbing, especially in urban centres, leading many to question whether the safety and security they once took for granted can continue in the future. With economic disparity, political instability, and rising frustration in certain communities, social unrest and crime are likely to increase. One of the most concerning trends is the rise in violent crime. Over the past few years, incidents of knife crime, gang violence, and street crime have been making headlines, particularly in cities like London and Manchester. Law enforcement agencies have reported an increase in youth violence, with gangs becoming more organised and violent. As social inequality continues to grow, the likelihood of these crimes escalating could put public safety at greater risk, particularly in disadvantaged neighbourhoods. Beyond violence, the social tensions in the UK are also on the rise. Issues like immigration, housing, and economic inequality are creating divides between different social and ethnic groups. Political polarisation is intensifying, and protests and demonstrations are becoming more common as people express their dissatisfaction with government policies. As tensions increase, the threat of social unrest may become a more frequent reality, leading to more frequent clashes between police and protesters and higher levels of public frustration. Additionally, as resources for public services like healthcare and education become more strained, frustration will likely continue to build. The combination of rising crime, political instability, and social divides will create an environment that may feel increasingly unsafe for many. For those who value personal safety and community stability, leaving the UK might become an attractive option. Relocating to countries with lower crime rates, greater social cohesion, and more effective policing could offer peace of mind in an increasingly uncertain future. Number 8. Limited housing availability. If you're considering leaving the UK before 2030, the housing crisis should be high on your list of reasons. The UK's housing market has become one of the most challenging and unaffordable in Europe, and experts predict that this situation is only going to worsen in the coming decade. With rising property prices, limited availability, and high rents, many people are finding it increasingly difficult to secure affordable housing. For individuals and families looking to maintain a stable and comfortable living situation, the current housing landscape may no longer offer that possibility. One of the most pressing issues is the sheer lack of housing supply. Despite ongoing efforts to build more homes, the demand for property continues to outpace supply, particularly in major cities like London, Manchester, and Birmingham. According to reports, the UK needs hundreds of thousands of new homes each year just to meet the growing population and the increasing demand for affordable housing. However, construction rates have struggled to keep up, leading to a severe housing shortage that drives up prices and rents across the board. For those looking to buy property, the situation is even more dire. Property prices have skyrocketed over the past decade, with the average home price in the UK nearly doubling in some areas. In cities like London, property prices have surged to unbelievable highs, making home ownership increasingly out of reach for many. And as prices continue to rise, young buyers and first-time homeowners are being pushed further out of the market, often having to rent for longer periods. Renting is no easier. As the demand for rental properties grows, rents have been climbing steadily, making it more difficult for renters to find affordable housing. In cities with limited rental supply, rents are reaching unsustainable levels, leaving tenants with little choice but to spend a larger percentage of their income on accommodation. As housing costs continue to rise, relocating to countries with more affordable and available housing options could offer a more secure future. Whether for property ownership or finding affordable rent, other nations could provide a better opportunity to settle down without the constant stress of housing instability. Number 9. Reduced quality of education. If you're considering leaving the UK before 2030, the decline in education quality could be one of the most compelling reasons. Education has long been a priority in the UK, but due to budget cuts, overcrowded classrooms, and staff shortages, the quality of both primary and secondary education has been steadily declining. For parents and young people hoping to secure a bright future, this trend is concerning. The UK's education system may struggle to provide the same level of opportunity and excellence it once did. One of the key issues is the underfunding of schools. Many schools, particularly in deprived areas, have seen their budgets slashed in recent years, leading to a lack of essential resources. This includes outdated textbooks, limited access to technology, and the inability to hire enough qualified staff to meet students' needs. With increasing class sizes and a shortage of teachers, students often don't receive the personalised attention and support they need to thrive academically. Moreover, the gap between affluent and disadvantaged areas is widening. Children in wealthier neighbourhoods have access to better funded schools, more extracurricular opportunities, and more academic support, while those in lower income areas face overcrowded classrooms and fewer resources. This disparity limits the chances of many young people reaching their full potential, further perpetuating inequality in society. As the UK struggles with these issues, it's expected that by 2030, the quality of education will continue to decline. University admissions will likely become even more competitive, while graduates may find themselves entering a job market that offers fewer opportunities due to economic instability. For parents who are concerned about the future of their children's education, countries with better funded schools, smaller class sizes, and a more equitable education system may offer better prospects. Moving abroad could provide an opportunity for children to receive an education that is more supportive, accessible, and conducive to success in the global job market. Number 10. Better opportunities abroad. For many, leaving the UK before 2030 might seem like the most practical choice, particularly when considering the better opportunities available in other countries. As the UK faces rising costs of living, political instability, and an uncertain future, relocating abroad could open doors to a higher quality of life, better career prospects, and more affordable living. Many nations around the world offer a more stable environment, with lower taxes, better healthcare systems, and more welcoming immigration policies. Stark contrast to what the UK might offer in the coming decade. Countries like Canada, Australia, and Germany are particularly appealing for their strong economies, high-quality healthcare, and excellent educational systems. These countries have also made strides in ensuring that their residents enjoy a higher standard of living. For instance, the cost of living in cities like Toronto, Melbourne, or Berlin is often more affordable than major UK cities like London, especially when considering factors like housing costs, tax rates, and healthcare expenses. Furthermore, the job market in many of these countries is booming, with lower unemployment rates and more opportunities in emerging sectors like technology, engineering, and green energy. Many nations have also introduced skilled worker programs that make it easier for professionals to migrate and work in fields where there's a demand for talent. If you're seeking career advancement or better pay, moving to a country with a stronger job market can make a significant difference in your financial future. For those seeking personal safety, countries with lower crime rates and political stability offer peace of mind and a sense of security for you and your family. Relocating to a nation with a stable government and less social unrest can provide a more peaceful environment, free from the anxieties that might come with living in an uncertain or politically unstable region. So, is it time to leave the UK before 2030? With rising costs, a fragile political climate, and an uncertain future, the UK is rapidly becoming a place where many are questioning whether staying is the right choice. From the housing crisis to declining healthcare and educational standards, the challenges ahead could make daily life far harder than it is now. If you're someone who values financial stability, personal safety, and a better quality of life, moving abroad might not just be an option. It might be the best decision you can make for your future. Countries like Canada, Australia, and Germany are offering better opportunities with more affordable living, stronger economies, and higher standards of living. The job market is healthier, the healthcare system is more reliable, and the quality of education remains top-notch. As we've seen, staying in the UK could mean navigating a more expensive, politically unstable, and dangerous environment in the coming years. For many, the appeal of a fresh start in a more welcoming and prosperous country is hard to ignore. We've put a lot of effort into bringing you this eye-opening content, and now we want to hear from you. Would you leave the UK by 2030? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to know what you think. And if you found this video valuable, hit subscribe. It's just one click, but it means the world to us. Is the UK falling apart? It might sound dramatic, but look around. Record high inflation, a collapsing NHS, political chaos, and even the possibility of the country breaking apart. Things have never looked this uncertain. Is this the beginning of the end for the United Kingdom?